So, welcome to LiberalViewer Sunday Live Clip Roundup. I'm just getting started, a couple minutes late here. Sorry about that. I was processing video clips right up to the end there. I'm pretty excited about today's show because I've got kind of a theme here. There was a big speech by President Obama on Thursday, and this is what I'm calling my "Is War is Over?" edition of LiberalViewer Sunday Clip Roundup, because a lot of the clips I'm going to be showing today are going to have to do with President Obama's suggestion that it may be time to refine and eventually repeal the authorization for use of military force that was passed like a week after September 11th, 2001 here in the United States. And I'll get more into the details of that. I want to welcome everyone who's here. I hope you can all see and hear me. Before I start playing clips and everything, let me see if I see I've got my viewers here watching. I see, I'm late. Yes, people saw that I'm late, but can you all see and hear me? I think I'm coming through loud and clear here. Yes, okay. So I'm gonna start playing clips because this LiberalViewer Sunday Clip Roundup edition has the theme of the President's speech on Thursday about the authorization of use of military force. I wanted to play about a 2-minute excerpt from that speech, and this is, I think, a pretty historic speech. I mean, it is rhetoric more than action, which, that diminishes its importance a little bit, but it's not without importance, and so I want to play that clip for you from Thursday's speech from President Obama at National Defense University here.
The choices we make about war can impact, in sometimes unintended ways, the openness and freedom on which our way of life depends. And that is why I intend to engage Congress about the existing authorization to use military force, or AUMF, to determine how we can continue to fight terrorism without keeping America on a perpetual wartime footing. The AUMF is now nearly 12 years old. The Afghan war is coming to an end. Core al-Qaeda is a shell of its former self. Groups like AQAP must be dealt with, but in the years to come, not every collection of thugs that labels themselves al-Qaeda will pose a credible threat to the United States. Unless we discipline our thinking, our definitions, our actions, we may be drawn into more wars we don't need to fight, or continue to grant presidents unbound powers more suited for traditional armed conflicts between nation states. So I look forward to engaging Congress and the American people in efforts to refine and ultimately repeal the AUMF's mandate. And I will not sign laws designed to expand this mandate further. Our systematic effort to dismantle terrorist organizations must continue. But this war, like all wars, must end. That's what history advises. That's what our democracy demands.
And I think that was a really important part of the speech there, where President Obama was talking about how the war has to come to an end. The authorization for use of military force is like 12 years old now. I didn't see a lot of shows going over what the authorization for use of military force, what it actually includes. One place, of all places I saw, they actually showed the text of the authorization for use of military force was on the Colbert report. I'm going to put that up here. And the authorization for use of military force that was passed about a week after September 11th says, the President is authorized to use all necessary and appropriate force against those nations, organizations, or persons he determines planned, authorized, committed, or aided the terrorist attacks that occurred on September 11th, 2001, or harbored such organizations or persons in order to prevent any future acts of international terrorism against the United States by such nations, organizations, or persons. Now, that's incredibly broad, and as someone who reads Supreme Court cases on civil liberties issues, one of the really nasty things about this authorization of use of military force is it comes up as a justification in some of the the worst abuses that have been going on since September 11th. Guantanamo, indefinite detention, warrantless wiretapping, drone strikes, all of that stuff. If you read the court cases, it's authorized by the declaration of war against Al-Qaeda or the declaration of war against the people who attacked us on September 11th and their associated forces, and it's pretty broad there. And so you would think with the U.S. president doing this historic thing, saying to Congress, I want to give you power back. You've given me too much power. And with all this like Republican talking points these days with the scandals going on that, the president is tyrannical and he's Nixonian and he's empirical, he's acting like an emperor and like a dictator, that they would welcome him giving back, saying, Congress, take back some power from me. But that is not actually the case. And the first, also from the Colbert Report, I saw Stephen Colbert kind of parody these Republicans like Lindsey Graham, and I'll show an actual clip from Lindsey Graham, Republican senator, in a minute, where they're saying, oh no, don't just, where they're saying, don't repeal the authorization for use of military force. It's actually, we need to broaden it because it only applies to terrorists who attacked us on September 11th and associated forces, and that's just not broad enough. We need to go broader than that. And that was satirized by Stephen Colbert last Thursday night in a great clip you can see here.
That thing can go, but there are so many other things that can come out. For instance, necessary, appropriate. We're not talking about wearing white pants after Labor Day. Okay, but that can go, and we don't need that. And I think that's dumb. That's redundant. That's old. This is gone. That's out. That's out. That's out. That's out. That's out. Okay, this is all you need. The president is authorized to use all force. All right?
That's pretty funny there. So I think that unfortunately that the reaction from some of the Republicans hasn't been too far off from that parody. That's like the really sad thing I was noticing on the Sunday news programs when Republicans were reacting to President Obama's speech. For example, I'll play right off the guy who Stephen Colbert was playing off of there. He first played a clip from Senator Lindsey Graham, who's been one of the harshest critics of Barack Obama on the war on terror, and Lindsey Graham's reaction was, it's pretty close to the Stephen Colbert parody, I thought, so check that out here.
At a time we need resolve the most, we're sounding retreat. Our enemies are emboldened all over the planet. Al-Qaeda in Iraq is coming back with vengeance. In Libya, you saw Al-Qaeda groups in Yemen and Libya working together. Our friends are uncertain. Syria is falling apart. We're talking about helping the rebels, but doing nothing about it. Iran is marching toward a nuclear weapon. The challenge of our time is to keep weapons of mass destruction out of the hands of radical Islamists, and we're failing in my view. Syria is about to fall apart. The chemical weapons there, enough to kill thousands, if not millions of Americans, can be compromised. Israel is very threatened by what's happening in Syria. Iran is marching toward a nuclear weapon, and we show this lack of resolve, talking about the war being over. What do you think the Iranians are thinking? At the end of the day, this is the most tone-deaf president I've ever could imagine, of making such a speech at a time when our homeland is trying to be attacked literally every day, changing the standards of when you can go after somebody with a drone. It has to be a continuing, imminent threat to the American people with no chance of civilian casualties, virtually no chance of civilian casualties. I think we're diminishing our national security infrastructure. Sequestration is dismantling the military at a time we need it the most. I've never been more worried about our national security than I am right now, and this speech did not help.
So you can see that Congress wasn't all that happy with President Obama saying that he wanted to give back some of the power that Congress gave the president about a week after September 11th, like 12 years ago now. And Lindsey Graham was not the only Republican who reacted that way. I noticed Senator Rand Paul was on This Week, and he got asked a question about, it was actually about drones, since Rand Paul did that whole filibuster on drones. But his answer seemed to like almost misunderstand who has to take back the power, and seemed to misunderstand that President Obama had offered or had told Congress, please take back this power from me. And you can see that. First, I'll show the question from ABC's Martha Raddatz, and then the answer from Rand Paul in this clip.
The president did say is there will be rules for the drone strikes. He said targets pose a continuing imminent threat, only near certainty, no civilians hurt or killed, and not used to punish terrorists. That seems like a change.
Yeah, but a lot of what's very important to myself and others is what the law says and how you should approach this. For example, it's not good enough to us that he's not using a power. We want him to assert that he doesn't have the power. For example, last year we passed legislation that I voted against and many civil libertarians oppose, and that's detaining citizens indefinitely without a trial and sending them to Guantanamo Bay. Now, the president said he won't use that power, but we think a president who really believed in civil liberties would have vetoed the bill and not signed the bill.
Well, I see a big difference between a president saying a war's at the end and whether or not you've won the war. We can claim that it's at an end, but this war is going to continue. And we have still tremendous threats out there that are building, not declining, building, and to not recognize.
Sorry there. It looks like did my sound go out there for a moment? Looks like I lost the sound there. Sorry about that. But I've got the sound back here. There's a slight technical difficulty, and anyway, what I said after the previous clip was I thought that Rand Paul was not doing a good job there because he was telling President Obama, putting it on President Obama that he had to take back the power or renounce the power, and it was actually Congress's responsibility. He was talking about the defense authorization, the National Defense Authorization Act that Congress passed, and President Obama signed, and when he signed it, he said he wished it didn't have all the stuff about indefinite detention in there. And maybe I kind of agree with Rand Paul. I wish that he had vetoed the bill, but it was a big bill that Congress had a lot of responsibility for too, and I think that Rand Paul is not really understanding what President Obama offered in his speech about how he wanted to give the power back, and that Congress has to recognize that more. And I'm sorry to say that I don't think Congress has really taken that responsibility seriously. And I also thought that there were other Republicans who didn't do a good job of responding to President Obama's speech. They didn't really recognize this call with with all the Republicans saying that Obama is tyrannical and that he has too much power. I wish that they would recognize and respond favorably to this call by President Barack Obama for the U.S. Congress to take back more power in the area of war. And another congressman who also, I don't think, reacted very well to President Obama's speech was Tom Coburn, who was on Face the Nation, who said this.
Well, I see a big difference between a president saying a war's at the end and whether or not you've won the war. We can claim that it's at an end, but this war is going to continue. And we have still tremendous threats out there that are building, not declining, building. And to not recognize that, I think, is dangerous for us in the long run and dangerous for the world.
Yeah, and I think that Tom Coburn there is, I don't know, why it is that Republicans seem to have such a vested interest in endless war. It reminds me of the George Orwell novel 1984, and even to the extent that Chris Wallace on Fox News Sunday, who I praised a couple weeks ago for asking tough questions to Mark Sanford, he was totally making these inappropriate analogies. Here's the question that he asked on Fox News Sunday about what President Obama did that I thought made an inappropriate analogy of the Cold War. Here.
Said wars must end, but the fact is the Cold War lasted for 40 years. Isn't there a danger of declaring an end to this war too soon?
And I thought that was totally inappropriate because the Cold War was not a declared war. It was, and to get rid of that authorization for use of military force, that would be like ending the Vietnam War, not ending the Cold War. Like getting rid of the Gulf of Tonkin resolution. I guess the Vietnam War wasn't really a declared war either. It had, but the Gulf of Tonkin resolution is kind of more analogous to the authorization for use of military force. And so I don't really understand why it is that all these Republicans have reacted so negatively to this speech asking for Congress to take back power. And I think that's pretty much... and one clip I saw that I thought people should see as to how the wars might not be over as fast as some people seem to think they're going to be, came from General John Allen. He was interviewed by Martha Raddatz on This Week with George Stephanopoulos. And he was talking about a different war, not the authorization for use of military force, but actually the war in Afghanistan, which a lot of people think is winding down next year. And there is going to be a lot of winding down of troops, but one thing I thought people should see, that General John Allen, who used to be the head of the forces in Afghanistan before he quit in the middle of a promotion because of the whole David Petraeus scandal that he was cleared from, I guess. And anyway, here's what he said about whether the war in Afghanistan is going to be ending in 2014.
That the Taliban have recognized is that we're not going anywhere. Eventually our numbers will come down pretty significantly, but there's going to be an international military presence in Afghanistan for a long time.
And you believe that is absolutely necessary, that we remain?
Oh, there's no question. The international community will remain engaged. Our forces will continue to train the Afghan forces well after 2014.
So that's a guy who knows what's going on in Afghanistan, and it looks like he believes that there'll be international forces, probably including American forces, in Afghanistan for quite a long time. So that war is winding down, but that war is not going to be over. So I showed basically all the Republican responses to what Barack Obama said about the authorization for use of military force. There was I have one Democrat response from Democratic Senator Chuck Schumer. I thought I would play that for you. It's better than the Republican response, but it still doesn't seem to really take on the issue that Barack Obama took on about needing to end that broad authority that Congress gave like a dozen years ago as a response to September 11th. And so anyway, here's what Chuck Schumer said about Barack Obama's speech asking for an end to the war or a refining of the goals.
Yeah, I think no one can dispute how strong the president's been on this war on terror. What he's saying is there's a new phase. We've been largely successful at dealing with al-Qaeda in Afghanistan and Pakistan. That's not over. There are new types of threats that we have to be vigilant about. But he said under this long-term war on terror where small groups of individuals can hurt us, we need some rules. We need some rules. We need some transparency. So American citizens and the citizens of the world know we're not just going willy-nilly. I think under scrutiny, what they've done will hold up very well. But having transparency, having rules, and engaging other activities other than military to help curb the war on terror, diplomacy, economic sanctions, and things like that, is going to be useful as well. So I think the president did a very, very smart pivot, realizing we're not going to let up on terrorists, but at the same time we're going to meet the changes in the world.
So that was kind of a more middle-of-the-road response. I don't think that Chuck Schumer really took after what the president was saying about needing to end this endless war. He was kind of saying we're going to still be tough on those terrorists, but this is a smart pivot, where we're going to refine and add more rules. And, I'm hoping that this is going to be more than just that kind of smart pivot. There's going to be a real pivot. I have this theory that, I may be too optimistic, but I have this theory that there's sort of a schedule in the Obama administration, and this year after his re-election is when he's going to try to get legislation done. He started with the gun control legislation, and then there's comprehensive immigration reform. There was supposedly going to be a grand bargain on trading entitlement reform for some more tax input from the rich that would get rid of the long-term budget deficit. Except for comprehensive immigration reform, I think that a lot of that's not really going to happen anymore, and maybe even comprehensive immigration reform isn't, especially because of the way Republicans have started focusing on these supposed scandals. So my theory is that after the president finishes the year of getting legislation done, then he needs to start focusing on his base again for the 2014 congressional elections, because congressional elections are low turnout elections where you have to really energize your base. And that's really going to be his best opportunity to be more of a civil libertarian, to do things like sounded like he wanted to do in this speech, end the war on terror, get rid of this authorization of use of military force that's been the basis for so many bad court decisions on Guantanamo, on electronic eavesdropping, on drone strikes, on just about everything bad from the war on terror. The courts will eventually find it authorized by that September 2001 authorization of use of military force. So I'm hoping this is a pivot of President Obama actually moving back more a little to the left to energize his base and maybe try to do some real things here, although most of what he suggested there requires congressional action. And it is rhetoric rather than action, and at the same time that he's talking about these things, he's also doing things that kind of follow through on what the Bush administration did in the war on terror in a lot of ways. And so there's kind of a contradiction there. And on that point, I wanted to play what I think, of course, is the best analysis of the whole thing, which came from Jameel Jaffer, who is, I think, deputy director of the legislative office of the ACLU in Washington, D.C. I may not have that title correct, but he is a high-level official in the American Civil Liberties Union on national security issues. And Thursday that President Obama gave this speech at National Defense University, he was on the Rachel Maddow show, and I will try to put a link to the whole clip. Well, there's a link to the whole clip down in the video description below where I'm speaking. And this is one of the best parts where he talked about the rhetoric versus the actions in this clip.
The president did something very significant by saying that we can't stay on a permanent war footing without compromising our democracy. So to the extent, at that level of generality, I think that the speech is powerful and compelling and overdue. It's one thing to commit to end the war and another thing to end the war. And when you get to the level of detail here, a lot sort of slips between your fingers. It's very difficult to pin down the language in this speech. There are some positive things that the president committed to do on Guantanamo: appoint a new envoy to negotiate transfers to other countries, lift the moratorium on transfers to Yemen, use the existing power under statutory law to transfer people who can be transferred. These are all very important things, and they are not the ultimate step. The ultimate step is releasing people from Guantanamo, but these are necessary steps towards that end. So on Guantanamo, I think there have been some positive developments. We have to see how they play out. On targeted killing, I think it's more complicated. Targeted killing, the administration has said that it's narrowing the authority to carry out strikes. To the extent that's true, that's obviously a welcome development. The administration is still claiming the authority to carry out strikes away from actual battlefields. It's claiming the authority to carry out strikes against people who don't present truly imminent threats. So it's this strange situation where you have the rhetoric of peace, but the reality of war, and which maybe there'll be some convergence there. Maybe eventually the reality will catch up to the rhetoric. But right now, I feel like the rhetoric of peace is way in front of the actual policies.
So that's a really good analysis there, where there's been a lot of rhetoric from Barack Obama over the years about civil liberties, and not all of it has, there hasn't been follow through on a lot of it. And so you'd be stupid to think that this speech by itself is going to be a big change. But as I was saying before, I showed that clip, I am hoping, and maybe I'm too optimistic on this, but I can see some political reason that Barack Obama might be pivoting back towards being more of a civil libertarian at this point in his presidency. And this speech coming when it did could signal that he's pretty much giving up on the legislative accomplishments part of his second term, with the possible exception of comprehensive immigration reform, which needs to happen without his fingerprints on it anyway, and that he's moving more towards being finding what civil liberties accomplishments he can find in the next couple of years that will help energize his base. And there may be some other things, but I thought that was anyway. Though that's the end of all the "is the war over" clips that I'm going to be showing here, but there were a few other clips that I wanted to show. One I thought was kind of interesting was on Fox News Sunday. They had an interview with Bob Dole, and who was a Republican. For those who don't know, he was a Republican for like 50 years in the Congress. He ran against Bill Clinton in 1996 and lost. And he was, a mainstream Republican leader for quite a few years. And the thing that I thought was really interesting about the interview there was the way that when they introduced Bob Dole, before they even started the interview, the accomplishments that they listed for him showed how much things have changed in the Republican Party. They're all things that Republicans certainly wouldn't be proud of in this day and age. So here's a very short clip from the introduction that Fox News Sunday gave to Bob Dole in this clip.
1961 to 1996, he represented Kansas on Capitol Hill, but he served the nation. He helped save Social Security, expand food stamps, and pass the Americans with Disabilities Act.
So they're giving Bob Dole credit as this great Republican for Social Security, food stamps, and the Americans with Disabilities Act. So I think that shows a little bit how the Republican Party has changed. So there are 2 other quick clips I want to play before I get to the live questions, and I have a little extra time today to get to those live questions. One clip I wanted to play, Fox News Sunday spent like the second half of the program today on trying to talk about climate change. You know, there are the tornadoes, and which may or may not be directly attributable to climate change and global warming and all of that. But there have been a lot more storms, and Face the Nation did about half an hour on it. And one fact that got reported, which may be more important than any of these other facts that we've been talking about, came from this guy, Jeffrey Kluger, I think his name is, from Time Magazine, who covers the issue. And he talked about something that happened this last week here.
I think what we see, though, the fact that we crossed 400 parts per million of CO2 in the atmosphere just last week, this is the highest it's been since the Pleistocene era, when there were forests in Greenland and sea levels were 60 feet higher than they are now. As recently as 1958, it was only 315. So we have supercharged, super accelerated CO2 input into the atmosphere. And this, I think, is what's driving so much of the mood or the personality, the climate change variables we see. I think what we see, though...
So that was an important clip there, because that could be, for the future of the planet, could be the most important thing that happened in the last week, that we passed this level of carbon in the atmosphere that the planet hasn't seen since the Pleistocene era. And, you know, I haven't made a lot of videos on climate change because there are some details to the science that I don't feel qualified to talk about. But, you know, at least in the broad strokes, you know, that human beings are causing climate change, and they're by several degrees. I think they were saying up to 14 degrees in the next 100 years. I mean, it's pretty scary. And even if we stop now, we have already put enough in there that the climate's going to change substantially. And so that could be the most important issue from the week. And it was kind of funny when I compare what Face the Nation was doing with the Power Player of the Week on Fox News Sunday. And these, I'm sure these are good people, you know, trying to help out veterans, but comparing it to the worries about climate change on Fox News Sunday, here are the Power Players of the Week. Comparing it to the worries about climate change on Face the Nation, here is the Power Players of the Week on Fox News Sunday.
We want to be the first responders for the first responders here in our own communities.
Bill Krause and Steve Newton are the co-owners of Mission Barbecue.
Yeah, that's right. So the Power Players of the Week on Fox News Sunday are the owners of a barbecue that has a huge, like, military... I thought it was a Humvee, but it's like a huge military vehicle out front. So they're like burning stuff with a big carbon fuel burning vehicle out front. And now they may be helping veterans, but I don't think they're helping the climate very much. So anyway, those are all the clips I have for you, I think, for LiberalViewer Sunday live clip roundup for this Sunday, most of which were on the question of whether the war is over. And I'd like to take some comments in the comment section. I have a few minutes left, and see if we can get some live discussion going. I'd mostly like to take comments on the topic of the clips I just showed, although I know people have come in and out of the live event, and so you don't always get a chance to see all the clips. But I thought we had some good clips today. I didn't skip any clips, did I? Let's see. Let me just go through my list of clips here and make sure I showed them all before we... Yeah, I showed all the clips. So having showed all the clips, let me check out the comments here and see if we can get some comments going for a few minutes. Let's see. We've got... I know I lost the sound at one point. I was a very bad... technician for every time there's technical difficulties, or almost every time, it's due to human error. I have to admit that right up front. So I'm sorry about that. But I'll put a little link for people who don't watch it live so they can go over it there. No audio, sound. Yes, okay. Okay, is anyone getting sound? Sound is gone. Video clips have sound, but your monologues are mute. So yeah, so I talked without sound for quite a while there. Thank you. Yes, okay, hear you now. Yeah, okay. So, It's Me says Republicans aren't happy unless we are at war with someone. Well, that's one explanation, and there is sort of a corporate, John Klein says constant war equals constant cash flow for the richest people in America, and that may also be true. And there's the whole military-industrial complex where it's not just the rich people who are getting the cash, but there are these industries that are based, there are people who aren't so rich whose jobs depend on defense industries, and of course there's probably a better use. We could spend that government money on something that would be more useful. Infrastructure. Look at that bridge that just fell down near Seattle in the last few days. Wouldn't it be nice to spend the money rebuilding our bridges than building tanks that they don't need anymore? So yeah, I definitely agree with that. Lieutenant St. Jeebus, is that how you pronounce that? LTST Jeebus? I think politicians need to admit that you can't wage a war on terrorism. Al-Qaeda, sure, but not terrorism. It is an action. You can't defeat it any more than you can defeat winking or jogging. And I totally agree with that comment there. And if you watch President Obama's full speech, and I'll have a link to it in the spot where I put that clip up, he specifically says this is a war on Al-Qaeda, and Al-Qaeda in the main, the way it existed when we declared this war on Al-Qaeda, doesn't exist anymore. Now there are these Al-Qaeda sympathizers and these spin-off groups, but the war on Al-Qaeda it's not, it doesn't rise to the level of, a real declared military war, if it ever did. It's not a nation state to begin with, but Osama bin Laden declared war on the United States. I think it was in '95. I don't know if a person can declare war on a country, but we declared war on Al-Qaeda and its associated groups and those who attacked us on September 11th. That's the authorization for use of military force. And you can't declare war on a tactic. I agree with what Lieutenant St. Jeebus said there, definitely. And the guy who declared war on us, he's dead, and a lot of the top lieutenants are dead, and Al-Qaeda is a totally different organization than it was at that time, and I don't know if it's really amenable to a real military action. There's this whole debate about whether it should be a law enforcement matter or a military matter, and it's really in between. It's sort of like special forces, and the CIA has some role in there, and even building up our relationships with other countries and helping them be able to have the internal security so that they can go after these people themselves. That's also important. But I definitely agree with what Lieutenant St. Jeebus said there. So let me see. I have a couple more questions I'm going to go for. John Klein says the average number of storms is about the same over the last couple decades. There's a lot of controversy as to whether any specific storm is attributable to global warming or climate change, but I think that what isn't that controversial is that as the temperature of the globe increases, the weather extremes will also increase. And and if you look right before that clip I played, they said that the tornado, there are things, the warm air that causes tornadoes has been increased, but the shear, and I don't understand all the technical, but there's some shear that's been decreased, so it's kind of a wash as to whether climate change has actually increased tornadoes, and there's some question as to whether it increases hurricanes, but whether it increases tornadoes or hurricanes, it does increase sea levels, and it does have all these other, especially drought I think that's the worst part about it. And then there are all these other weird changes. But yeah, I do agree what John Klein said there, that you can't necessarily connect any particular storm or any number of storms to climate change. Shadow Band 2 says, do you believe Congress wants to try to restore the balance between the executive and legislative branches? Congress doesn't have to make as many difficult votes that can now be done unilaterally. Well, I mean, I don't know. I that's kind of why I played the clips I did today, is you would think with the way the Republicans have been yelling about the tyrannical president and the president being, with all of his czars. They started with the czars last time, and now with these scandals, they're saying that he's, this imperial Nixonian president. You'd think that with this speech where he was offering to give back power, they would be a little more receptive. So I don't know why the Republicans weren't more receptive, and even the Democrats. I played that Chuck Schumer quote. I think they don't want to say the war on terror is over because they don't want to be painted as soft on terror in their next election. So I think that some of the answer to that has to come from public opinion. I've heard that recent public opinion polls show that people are less willing to give up their liberties because of terrorism this long after September 11th, even after the Boston Marathon bombing. That's what polls show, that Americans are less likely now to want to give up civil liberties than they were right after September 11th, despite this latest more smaller scale terrorist attack in Boston. And so maybe as public opinion doesn't bite politicians who say that we have to take back power from the executive, and that's becoming more popular on the Republican side, and there's always been a civil libertarian part to the Democratic Party. I count myself in there. So with all of that, hopefully Congress tends to follow public opinion more than shape it. So I think that is kind of the answer to that. I think I have time for maybe one more question. Ryan Bartley says, given the degree of unilateral power available to Obama and the extent to which he is preemptively accused of using it, whether he does it or not, why isn't he using more of it for the change he promised? Well, the thing is that where he has a lot of unilateral power is in foreign relations and fighting, his war powers is where he has a lot of unilateral power. He doesn't have that much domestic unilateral power, and he has used it somewhat. Like when Congress didn't pass the DREAM Act, he put forth an executive order that created a way for, and the DREAM Act was, for those who don't know, was a piece of legislation that for about 10 years Congress was trying to pass, that said people who are brought here as immigrants, undocumented immigrants as children, where it was no fault of their own, we would give them a path to citizenship if they would go to college or join the military and didn't have a criminal record. And that started off as like a bipartisan idea with Republicans and Democrats, but as immigration has been demagogued by Republicans to try to appeal to certain xenophobic members of their base, the Republicans have moved away from almost any kind of immigration reform, at least until the last election. And so when the DREAM Act didn't pass Congress, President Obama, before the election, said, okay, well, those people who were brought here as children who don't have criminal records, we're not going to deport them, and we're going to give them special work visas and some kind of legal status. And he did that by executive order. And there are certain things he can do by executive order, but not that much domestically. All this unilateral power I've been talking about is war power. It's power to send troops places, to send drones anywhere in the world, because you saw that authorization for use of military force. So, that is incredibly broad. And that's why I thought this was such an important speech. And I'll put that back up here real quick. This is from the Colbert report. Why is this not going up there? Okay, there we go. Basically the authorization for use of military force from September, I think it was this was passed within a week of September 11th, 2001, says President is authorized to use all necessary and appropriate force against nations, organizations, persons who planned, authorized, committed, aided terrorist attack on September 11th, harbored such organizations, persons, or in order to prevent any future acts of international terrorism against the United States by such nations, organizations, or persons. So it does have to be connected up to September 11th, but it is a very broad power. And but it's all, it's almost all something that is foreign affairs and war powers. It does allow the president to detain people indefinitely as enemy combatants, including this guy Jose Padilla, or at least that's what some courts found, who was an American citizen arrested at Chicago International Airport, but who had gone and trained with Al Qaeda. So. That there are domestic uses for the war powers in detaining people, but in terms of domestic issues, the president doesn't have those unilateral powers. So I guess that's why that there isn't a lot of use of unilateral executive power to do things on issues that most people care about domestically, just because that the president doesn't have the same broad powers that he does over foreign affairs, especially when he's been authorized to use force. So anyway, I'm glad that so many people showed up for my Liberal Viewer Sunday Live clip roundup. I hope you liked the theme. I think it was a really important theme, and I really hope something comes of this rhetoric in the Obama speech this week. I hope it doesn't end up just being rhetoric, that it turns out to be action as well. I'm still working on the video I mentioned I was working on last week, although I've actually posted it with, if you go over to my Facebook page, Facebook.com/LiberalViewer, you'll see I posted a link to the Fox News clip I'm criticizing and the sources I'm using to criticize it on this this issue of whether students should be suspended for willful defiance, which is an issue here in California and across the nation. It's an important issue, an important domestic issue I've been working on with the ACLU here in California, and so I'm making a video about that, and I'm hoping to make another video later in the week that will be another produced video, and of course there will be Liberal Viewer Wednesday Live at 4:30 p.m. Pacific this Wednesday, which will be just the pure Q&A show for those who didn't like the fact that I didn't have that much time to take questions after I played all the clips, but I did play a lot of clips this week, and I've gone extra long. I guess it's almost 50 minutes here. Well, not quite that long, 40 minutes. Anyway, thank you all for joining me. I hope you enjoy the rest of your long weekend, at least here in the U.S., where we have a long Memorial Day weekend, and thanks for joining me, and I'll see you hopefully on